Um, Thanks all for coming out. I thought I'd share my experience and how I years ago, probably about 5 years ago, when I started to get serious about real estate investing. I ran across the Real Estate Guys radio show. They have a podcast that I listen to every week. They're the #1 downloaded podcast in real estate investing in over 191 different countries. They have over 3 million downloads. So I started listening to these guys, ended up going with them on a week-long cruise where there was a lot of real estate education and other investing courses. On board, I met John Turley. And one of our stops during the cruise was to Ambergris By The Sea. John Turley is the main sales force behind the largest development project in Ambergris Key, and the real estate guys are the marketing arm of the project that we're involved in. After the cruise, I stayed in touch with Robert and Russ and from the real estate guys, and went to a few more of their events, and have since partnered with them on private placement, and have also invested with some of their affiliates in the U.S. To date, they are some of the best investments in my portfolio. My experience with them is when they introduced me to one of their team members or affiliates, they're usually on the top of their game. And the reason I tell you all this is because if I was looking at a deal internationally and would not know the team that's involved on the ground personally, it would scare me to death. I'm very comfortable with the team on the ground at Mahogany Bay Village. It is because of the team that is going so well and we're having the kind of success we are having. I will tell you they're world class, and I'm excited to be part of it. Due to what I see happening over there and what I know about the market, and having been in Belize 5 times over the last 2 or 3 years, I can't help but share it with friends. Based on what I know and the potential that we feel is there, I would feel guilty not sharing it with friends and family and people in my community. Most of you in the room know me as the shed guy or the trailer guy, but more than any other profession, I'm an investor and have been for a long time. I've been investing in multifamily over the last several years and have done very well, and have a team of people around me that are awesome, and the team in Belize is awesome. After getting myself into some serious deal flow, I had to make a decision. I either had to invest slower, nice way of saying I ran out of cash, or I could use the team that I work with and invite others to invest right alongside of me. That leads right into tonight's presentation for tonight, or that leads right into the presentation for tonight, and I'll explain how that works later. For those of you who haven't been to Belize yet, I think there's a great opportunity to see some first-hand data on what's happening, and I could think of nobody better to give you that info than John Turley himself. John Turley is 45 years old. He's happily married to Lucinda Turley. They celebrated 21 years of marriage together. They are parents of 3 children together: Trent, age 16, Christina, age 12, and Lauren, age 8. The Turley family are in their 9th year of living full-time in Ambergris By The Sea. John's vast real estate experience extends over 22 years. He has experience in commercial and residential property management, commercial and residential real estate sales and marketing, as well as real estate development, investment, appraisal, and consulting. John Turley is the founder and owner or co-owner of 3 active real estate companies: Elite Real Estate Investments, Ltd., founder, owner, managing director of Remax Southwind in Ambergris By The Sea, founder, owner, managing broker of Remax Island Real Estate in Key Conquer, Belize. For 3 consecutive years, 2011, 12, and 13, John Turley has ranked among the top 30 individual Remax associates worldwide in commissions earned, out of a total of more than 92,000 associates. That's a top 0.003% worldwide. John has been the #1 top producing Remax associate for all the Caribbean, Central America, and South America for 2011, 12, and 13. Please help me welcome my good friend and fellow real estate investor, John Turley.
Well, that was a very nice introduction, Dave. I appreciate it. Dave touched on at the very end there, when he mentioned his fellow real estate investor. Everything that I do with regard to the brokerage, with regard to real estate sales, whether it's commercial or residential, is effectively my side job. And that may sound kind of funny to talk about, finishing #1 in the region being the side job, but the reality is first and foremost for myself as being a real estate investor. Just as Dave mentioned, he's known as the trailer guy or the shed guy or the log home guy, but first and foremost, he's a real estate investor. And so real estate investing is really near and dear to me. I realize that there are opportunities in your local community, regionally, nationally, and internationally. And just real quickly, I want to just start by asking a couple of questions of the audience here. How many of you, when you think of investing internationally, investing outside of the United States, how many of you think at least just a tiny bit that there's a little bit of apprehension or fear or nervousness or skepticism or concern about the potential of investing internationally? And put them up. I would expect to see almost every hand up. Now, the same people, I want to ask you this question. How many of you think that it's potentially risky to have all your eggs in one basket, all of your investments tied to one economy, one currency, one country, and everything is all in one basket? And the truth is that in this day and age, putting our head in the sand is risky, doing nothing is risky, and taking action is risky, which means we need to be informed. We need to become educated. When we can make an educated, informed, willful decision is when we're going to have the best opportunity to make the right decision. So I want to just define, first of all, what a foreign market is, because to most of you, Ambergris Caye or Belize as a whole, or all of the Caribbean as a whole, would be considered a foreign market. A foreign market is any market you're not familiar with. So it could be that for those of you who invest locally, that Philadelphia is a foreign market. Pittsburgh is a foreign market. Doesn't mean it's a foreign country, it's just that it's a foreign market. So once we become familiar, once we become educated, once we become knowledgeable about a particular market, it's no longer foreign to us. So for Dave, Ambergris Caye, Belize is no longer a foreign market. He has a great depth of understanding and knowledge. He's done his due diligence. He's been in the market. He's been involved in the market for a number of years. So for him, it's not a foreign market. There are actually people who live right in and on that island that to them investing there would be a foreign market because they don't even understand the very place that they live. So I just want to set the table with that with that notion or that thought. And I'm going to go back and just explain a little bit about what brought me to Ambergris Caye, Belize. I moved there 9 years ago, my wife and I and our children, and our story goes back to 2005. In February 2005, we were living in Colorado. That's where my wife's family's from, and we had been living in Colorado for a number of years. And we had a couple of very successful businesses. I say successful from a financial standpoint. I'll help to define success differently in just a moment because I learned some tough lessons, and you'll hear them in the story. And in 2005, I was working in a home office. I was very privileged to get to work out of my home, and I thought that meant that I had a better quality of life because I would have more time with my family. But the home office often meant being in the office at 6 and trying to get a jump on the day and working all day long, and then my wife would tell me, hey, it's time to have dinner with the family, and so I'd come and sit down at the dining room table and we'd eat dinner together, and then I'd tell my wife, well, honey, I got to do just a little bit more work. And before I knew it, she'd say it was time to tuck the kids in bed, give them a kiss goodnight. So I'd do that, and I'd tell her, you know what, I just got just a few more things I've got to get done, and be back in my office. And before I knew it, she'd say, honey, I'm going to bed. Are you coming to bed? I'll be right there. Of course, when I went to bed, she was long since asleep, and the whole process started all over again the next day. And on one particular day, I was in my office working on my computer, and I had the doors open to the living room, and my son walked by, and I looked and I did a double take. And I thought, my goodness, is he getting big? And I had to stop and think to myself, how old is Trent now? And I thought, well, let's see, it's 2005. He was born in 97. He's 8. He can't be 8 years old. There's no way he's 8 years old. I could have sworn the last time I really paid attention he was 5 years old. And I literally felt as though there were 3 years that were just gone. And I had an epiphany, and I sat down with my wife that night and I said, honey, we have got to get out of the rat race. We've got to quit doing what we're doing because you only get one chance to be a parent. You only get one chance to to spend the quality time as a husband and wife and as parents and as children and as a family unit. And I wasn't doing it. I thought I was a good provider. I thought I was a good husband. I thought I was a good father because from a financial standpoint, we were doing exceptionally well, but we didn't have the quality of life. And that became our mission objective. And so that's really where our story takes off from was, and you'll understand why I share a little bit about my personal story because it will come full circle and will pertain immensely to the whole story of investment and the investment opportunity in this marketplace. So the photo you see here was taken about 100 feet from my office on the beach in San Pedro town, Ambergris Key, a very picturesque little town. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Here's some photos of my family from back in 2005. You can see my son Trent, my wife Lucinda, my oldest daughter Christina, and Lauren was just a couple months old. She's literally an island baby. She's pretty much lived her whole life on the island of Ambergris Key at this point. And my wife and I said, you know what, if we were to just make quality of life the number one focus, and we were to start from scratch with a clean slate, where would we want to live? What would be important to us? What would be our wants, needs, desires, and requirements in terms of the community and safety and security and just all the different things that we'd look for? And we said, what if we were to literally look at the whole world, to pull out a globe and say, if we were to move anywhere on planet Earth with the objective of having the best quality of life possible, what would that place look like? And I had grown up living internationally. My dad was in the oil industry, so I spent 9 years in Europe before going to college in Colorado. And I wanted my children to have a chance to see what it was like to explore the world and to be a global citizen and to be a cultural minority and to see what it was like to see other countries and even the United States through other filters, through other eyes. So my wife and I started looking at different places, different countries. We came up with a list, kind of a shopping list, if you will, and this is what our list looked like. This was our wants, needs, desires, and requirements. Now, for example, you'll see there at the very top of the list, language, English speaking. I wish that I could stand before you and tell you that I am bilingual or trilingual or quadlingual or whatever that would be. I'm not. I'm horrible at learning foreign languages. I'm horrible at learning anything other than English. So for my wife and I, we had a predisposition to say, if we're going to move outside of the U.S., we want to go somewhere English speaking. And it just so happens 91% of Americans only speak English. So we had that in common with most people. Climate. We thought, it'd be kind of nice to be somewhere that has a wonderful climate. Now, the last time I was here in February, I had the great privilege of being here for a monstrous blizzard and got to drive from Shady Maple back to Philadelphia in the middle of a blizzard late at night. Dave assures me that tonight that won't happen. So I appreciate that. I guess it might help that I'm here in August. Lifestyle, education, medical care, safety, security. There were a whole list of things that helped to eliminate different places. Proximity. We wanted to be reasonably close to the United States. My family, my wife's family, business interests, investments, real estate. So we didn't want to be too far from the U.S. We wanted it to be safe, secure. We wanted to have a good legal system. Because I'm a real estate investor, I wanted to make sure that it had the right property rights. I wanted to have British common law, which is the basis of law that we have in the United States. British common law is what gives us fee simple title, whole ownership, freehold property, what we're used to and accustomed to here in the U.S. So I wasn't interested in looking at countries that have Napoleonic civil law or Sharia Islamic law, because those are different types of property rights. They're not as protective as what we're accustomed to. So I started going through my whole list, and what happened was the list got shorter and shorter and shorter until the country of Belize, the only English-speaking country in Central America, was right there at the top of the list. And within the country of Belize, specifically the island of Ambergris Key, which is both the #1 tourist destination and the #1 retirement destination. And so we didn't know for sure that this would work for us. This just happened to be what effectively had the best scorecard. So my wife and I went down to spy out the land for a week in May of 2005. We came home, we said, you know what, we think this is it. Let's give it a shot. We're going to move there, lock, stock, and barrel. And if we love it, we'll probably stay for 2 years, in which case we'll move on to life's next great adventure. If we hate it and we misjudged it and we're wrong, well then we'll stick it out for a year, and you can endure anything for a year and call it a learning experience. And after a year, then we'll come back to Colorado. And we actually said, well, let's hold on to our house just in case things don't work out and it's not all that we thought it would be. October will be our 9-year anniversary. And every quarter of every year, my wife and I sit down and we ask ourselves, is this the place on earth that has the best quality of life? And if the answer we felt was no, if we truly felt there was somewhere better, I could keep my investments, I could keep my properties, I could keep my companies, I could keep everything that I have there other than myself, and I could go to wherever I felt had a better quality of life. but every quarter of every year for 36 quarters in a row, I absolutely definitively feel it has the best quality of life. Now, that's not to sell you on moving there. I'm not trying to, I'd love to have you as neighbors, don't get me wrong, but that isn't the objective. But I tell you the story because that's just a microcosm. That's just looking just at my family, my circumstance, and some decisions that we made 9 years ago. But they're going to come into play in our discussion a little bit later in a very, very big way, and I think you'll understand why I took the time to share that story with you. So, without further ado, a couple of photos to just kind of set the scene of just how beautiful an area this is. The fishing is so good, this is what we use for bait. Now these are some beautiful grouper. We have the advantage of the largest living barrier reef in the world is about 400 to 800 yards from the beach. A quarter mile from when you're standing on the shore is you only go 400 yards out and you're catching fish this big because they're in the deep water just on the outside of the barrier reef. So when we go deep sea fishing, we're not more than a mile or 2 miles from shore. It's not a 45-minute boat ride to get to where the big fish are. The big fish are just right there waiting for us. So, and then this is the closest thing we have to a McDonald's or a Taco Bell or a Kentucky Fried Chicken or a Wendy's. We don't have a single franchise restaurant. There's not a branded restaurant at all. It's very simple. It's a very simple, quaint way of life. And so this is kind of a restaurant row. You've got 3 restaurants there side by side. Might look like it's just one, but that's actually 3 different restaurants, little fast food stands. Now the country of Belize, geographically, for those of you who don't know, is bordered by Guatemala and Mexico. It's considered a Caribbean nation and a Central American nation or country. As I mentioned, it's the only English-speaking country. It's very sparsely populated. It's 330,000 people in the whole country. That's the 4th lowest population density in the Western Hemisphere. And just to kind of put it in perspective in terms of how sparsely populated it is, 46% of the whole country is National Park and Marine Reserve. Now just picture a map of the United States, and I meant to put a map up here so you could kind of do this visualization with me, but if you were to look at a map of the United States and imagine that everything east of the Mississippi River became national park overnight, that would be a massive national park, everything east of the Mississippi River, but it still wouldn't be 46% of the U.S. So there's a higher percentage in Belize that's National Park and Marine Reserve than would be represented even by everything east of the Mississippi River. Now, Belize is made up of the mainland as well as the keys or the islands. There's over 200 islands, 2 of which are populated. When I say populated, some have a person or a family or a couple structures, but there's 2 that actually have towns or villages and infrastructure. And the largest of those islands, the most populated, is Ambergris Key. And you see it here circled, and that's where we're going to focus our attention. It's at the very northern end of Belize. It's an island that's 24 miles long. It's about 3 miles wide. It's the same size as Roatan, Honduras, and Grand Cayman, 2 other islands in the Caribbean. But those 2 islands have a population of about 60,000 people. Ambergris Key has a population of 22,000. So we're about 1/3 the population density of Roatan or Grand Cayman, neither of which is overpopulated if you've been to either one of those. As I said, we have the largest living barrier reef in the world. It's the largest barrier reef in the Western Hemisphere. It is exceeded by the Great Barrier Reef, but unfortunately the Great Barrier Reef is no longer considered a living barrier reef. So the Belize Barrier Reef is in very good condition, very healthy, and Belize, and specifically Ambergris Key, is a world-class water sports destination. Fly fishing, deep sea fishing, spear fishing, diving, snorkeling, all the different water sports. There's a couple of concepts that we want to make sure we understand before we go on to the next slide. You'll see mentioned here room count, and room count refers to the type of investment property that we have. Now, by a show of hands, how many of you have some type of an investment property? That's a pretty substantial percentage. So if that investment property is a rental property, whether it's commercial or residential, you likely receive your rent on a monthly basis. Would that be accurate? Would that be correct? So in this market, you certainly could do that. You could have a property and you could rent it on an annual lease with monthly payments, but odds are very likely that you would choose not to do that. And the reason being that there's so much more value in a property because of it being a tourism market A property rents by the night or by the week considerably more than it does on a monthly basis. Case in point, a condominium that might rent for $2,000 a month would rent for $400 a night. So if you're the owner of that property, you're going to have a higher management fee if it's rented nightly or weekly, because you're going to have housekeeping and reservations and front desk, and there's more involved with nightly turnover of a property. But when you're looking at $400 a night versus $2,000 a month, you don't have to have a calculator to realize that one is better than the other. So in this particular market, we really key in and focus on the opportunity, which is short-term rentals, nightly, weekly rentals. So we keep track of what's called room count. Now, room count is everything that is a hotel or a bed and breakfast or a condo or a villa, any rental property at all that's rented on a nightly or weekly basis. So back in 2006, we had 670 rooms. Now that's a drop in the bucket. That's a pretty small market. 6 years later, the end of 2012, we hit 2,000 rooms. Now there's two ways to look at that. One is to say, well, I'm pretty good at math. 670 to 2,000, that was a triple. You tripled. That was a 300% increase in inventory in 6 years. How do I know the market didn't get overbuilt? Well, rest assured it's not, and I'll prove that here shortly. But the more important way of looking at it is that 2,000 rooms is the minimum required to be considered a major resort destination. Until you have 2,000 rooms, there's three groups that won't even pay attention to you: charter companies, consolidators, and travel agents. So 2,000 rooms is the tipping point. It's when the match strikes the matchbook and a market starts to grow, starts to take off. Kind of like the shape of a hockey stick. You've got the flat part of the blade, and then all of a sudden it just goes up at a steep angle. So that's what happens when you hit 2,000 rooms, because now you have the economies of scale. Now it makes sense for travel agents to start paying attention to a market because there's enough rooms for them to do business. Charter companies start looking to see, how can we block out 50 seats on a flight, regularly scheduled flight each week? How can we block out 50 hotel rooms in a hotel every night of the year? So 2,000 rooms is when that starts to happen. And so we'll pay attention in particular to see what happened at the end of 2012 when we reached 2,000 rooms. I think you'll find it pretty fascinating. So just want to make sure we have an understanding of how significant that 2,000 room number is, and that's going to be a baseline that we're going to talk about through our discussion. So this is an aerial view of Ambergris Caye looking from the north to the south. It helps us to see the close physical proximity of the barrier reef. The barrier reef is shown by the white line there of the waves breaking over the reef itself. From the barrier reef to the shoreline, the average water depth is about 6 to 10 feet is all. Just 6 to 10 feet. Outside the barrier reef, the deepest water in all of the Caribbean, 3,000 to 3,500 feet deep, just a few miles offshore from Ambergris Caye. So truly stunning, just the difference between how shallow versus how deep the water is. This also helps you to see how sparsely populated the island is. And our next photo is going to zoom in a little bit on our major town, or population center, if you will, the town of San Pedro. We can see the airstrip there. The airstrip is where you fly into from Belize International Airport. So we're going to talk about the airlines and the flights that are coming in, and how we're growing with our airlines momentarily. But when you land at Belize International Airport, it's a 13 or 14 minute flight to come over to San Pedro, and you land right there at that airstrip. Notice in the bottom right-hand corner of the photo there, that's the town core. That's the downtown area. You notice the bustling high-rises there, the towering high-rise buildings. Do you see those there? It may be kind of hard to make out because they're only 4 stories high. That's the tallest building allowed is 4 stories. Now, you might wonder, is it because they got together a bunch of engineers and town planners and architects, and they determined that, there wasn't the geographic stability to go higher, or was it because of tropical storms? Nope, quite simply, the Ambergris Caye Local Building Authority and the Town Council decided they don't want anything taller than 44 feet because that's the height of a mature coconut palm tree. How's that for sound reasoning? I happen to think it's a brilliant way of making the determination. We don't want anything towering above the palm trees. So you can go 44 feet or 4 stories if you have an acre or larger. If you have less than an acre, you can go 38 feet or 3 stories. That creates scarcity. As real estate investors, we like scarcity. Scarcity helps to raise values. So Ambergris Caye will always be closer to a St. Bart's than it will be to a Cancun or a Waikiki, for example. Thank you, Dave. In fact, we'll never see towering high-rise buildings. We won't ever have 30, 40-story buildings like you would in Waikiki or Cancun, and I think that's fantastic, and that's what we all enjoy about Ambergris Caye and what makes it a very special place. Now, if we zoom in to San Pedro, we'll see that there's 3 streets that run north-south. There's Front Street, Middle Street, and who can guess? Back Street. There you go, very good. So we got Front Street, Middle Street, and Back Street. Try to keep it simple. They do have real names, nobody knows what they are. We just stick to front, middle, and back because that's pretty easy to remember. And this is Front Street, and we see our 3 primary modes of transportation: on foot, on bicycle, and on golf cart. So that's how we get around. Now, 3 miles from where this photo is taken on Front Street is the first underwater national park in Central America. It's called Holchan Marine Reserve, and it's literally like swimming in an aquarium. In fact, this is a photo of what it looks like in the marine reserve there. And if you had a panoramic, then what you would see in the rest of this photo are the sea turtles and the manatee and the lobster and all the other fish that weren't captured in this shot here. But it's just truly amazing. Another photo here just showing the crystal clear water quality and the abundant marine life. Now, one more aerial photo before we get into some of the numbers and the details. This is just to help us to be oriented looking from south to north. So the barrier reef is on the right-hand side, or the eastern seaboard of the island. From the west coast of the island to the mainland is 12 miles. So we're 12 miles offshore from mainland Belize. And the very, very northernmost part of the photo there is the border with Mexico. Now, the northernmost part of Ambergris Caye is a national park, and the southernmost part of the Mexican peninsula is national park. So we have unpopulated border on both sides. We have national park facing national park. So there's no population center on either Belize or Mexico where the border between the two occurs. One of my favorite real estate quotes is from Roy Rogers. Find out where people are heading and invest there before they arrive. Now that just sounds about as basic as can be. But we're going to take a look at that quote from 2 different angles. One angle is from a tourism perspective. If we could find out where people are going with tourism growth, where is tourism growth headed, and if we can invest there before the curve, then we can benefit. We also want to find out where people are retiring, where they're relocating, where are the baby boomers going? Because if we can find out where people are retiring and invest there before they get there, then we too can benefit. So we're going to talk about the Great Belize real estate boom. Now, you may not have read that in the newspaper, you may not have heard that exact phrase on the news, but I'll tell you exactly why we are in the midst of a great, tremendous real estate boom that's going to go from this year all the way through 2029. We have 15 years of certain growth, of certain boom ahead of us, and I'll tell you why that's not just speculation on my part, but why there's a sound basis for making that definitive comment. So there's 3 different foundation pillars. We have tourism, we have the baby boomers, and then we have what I call the contrarian pillar. The contrarian pillar is the one that moves in the opposite direction. What happens if something occurs in the U.S. economy that slows down tourism or slows down the rate of people looking to move because they're in fear of the economy or an economic crash or a downturn? Well, the contrarian pillar in this case is the exodus of capital from the U.S. And we saw this in 2009 during the recession. So we'll talk about not what will happen if there's a downturn, but there will be a downturn. There are cycles. There are market cycles. And it would be rose-colored glasses for us to pretend that the 4th longest bull market in history is going to continue without ever having a correction or without having another significant major downturn. Many of us are concerned about a currency crisis, about the U.S. dollar and about a crash of the U.S. dollar. If we're not concerned about it, then we have our head in the sand, quite frankly. So we'll talk about that contrarian pillar and how it actually moves in opposite direction to tourism. So as far as a tourism timeline, let's take a look at what's been happening in tourism and what's happened just the last couple years, and even more significantly, what's going to be happening in the next few years to come. For 8 years in a row, Islands Magazine has rated Ambergris Caye as one of the top 10 islands in the world to live on. Now, this is a well-respected magazine with over 550,000 readers, 203,000 subscribers, average annual income of $175,000, so very affluent readership. who consistently, year after year after year after year, say that Ambergris Caye, one of the best islands in the world to live on. In fact, in 2009, they said it is the #1 island in the world to retire to, without a doubt. Now that was significant because 2009 was 2 years before the first baby boomers started reaching the age of 65. And of course we know that there's been a lot of attention paid to where to retire and desirable places to retire, and we'll talk more about that in the baby boomer section. But let's go back to 2012. Remember we said the end of 2012 we hit 2,000 rooms and that we should see something in the market happen as a result. We should see some evidence of the travel agents and consolidators and charter companies starting to pay attention. Here's that evidence. At the end of 2012, tourism arrivals just for that year were up 16.3%. Now, it's always important to ask compared to what? Because if 2011 it had been down 20%, then we may have only gotten back to where we were. So it's important to ask, well, hey John, what about 2011? I mean, what was this growth on top of? Well, 2011 was an all-time record. So before that, 2007, before the recession, was our previous record. 2011 was a new all-time record, and we blew the all-time record out of the water by 16.3%. That's a massive, massive amount of growth. Now, let's put some numbers on that. If there's 2,000 rooms in the marketplace, and you have 16.3% growth, how many additional rooms, whether they're condos or hotel rooms, do you have to add just to absorb that growth and maintain equilibrium? Not to have an increase in occupancy, not to have your average daily rate, your nightly rate skyrocket, just to absorb that growth. Well, the answer is 16.3% of 2,000 is 326. That's right, you all got that right. So if we had had 326 more hotel rooms or condos built in 2012, then our supply would have equaled our demand. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the question is, were there 326 new units, turnkey, rent-ready, that came online in 2012? The answer is no. Were there 300? No. Were there 200? Were there 100? Were there 50? There were 30. So we had 30 hotel rooms and or condos combined, total inventory on the whole island that came online, came on market in 2012, when what we needed was 10 times that number. So our demand outstripped our supply by a factor of 10. 10x on our supply and demand ratio. That's for 2012. The question is, what about 2013? Was this just an anomaly? Was 2012 just a blip on the radar and everything was going to sort itself back out the next year? Or was this in fact the tipping point, the match striking the matchbook like I described? Well, we'll let the market speak for itself. 2013, everybody wondered, could we possibly have more growth on top of 16.3%? In February of 2013, who here has heard of TripAdvisor? Whether you use it or not, if you've heard of TripAdvisor, TripAdvisor is millions of people in 82 countries around the world who are rating restaurants and hotels and destinations based on expectations and how well expectations are met. In February 2013, TripAdvisor rated Ambergris Caye the #1 island in the world. Now, this was according to millions of reviews from people in 82 countries saying, you know what, out of every island in the world, this is the place. This is the best place to go to from a tourism perspective. So as a result, in 2013, we had a new all-time record. We saw additional growth of 6.1% on top of 16.3%. Now, again, we always want to make sure that we dig below the numbers. Is the growth only happening at one time of year? For example, if the growth is only happening in the wintertime, it may not be sustainable because you could fill up to capacity in the wintertime, but if you're not seeing your growth spread across the other seasons, then your growth could cap out. So we want to look behind the numbers. So if we look behind the numbers, this chart represents each of the 12 months of the year. And so they're color-coded. So at the bottom there, the burgundy color is January, purple is February, kind of the aqua or teal color is March, orange is April, and you get the idea. But this shows from 2009 through 2013, and the reason for this is to help us to see that the growth has been steady and consistent across all 12 months of the year, across all 4 seasons of the year. That means it's sustainable, and that's important for us as potential real estate investors to make sure we understand the market. Now, you notice at the top left, it shows a 3-year period from 2009 to 2012. The 3-year increase was 19.33%. On the top right, it shows the 4-year increase was 26.7%. Now, the reason I included these specific years, in particular on the left there, 2009 to 2012, is that I was there full-time, living on the island, from 2009 through 2012, and I have to tell you that there was more growth, or at least there felt like there was more growth than 19.33%. But the official government source, the Belize Tourism Board, is who compiles these statistics. And according to them, they said, nope, this is the tourism growth. We had just shy of 20% growth over 3 years. But being boots on the ground, living it, experiencing it every single day, and the owner of the largest real estate brokerage on the island, I have to tell you, it seemed like the growth was even more than that. And then I realized the problem. Notice at the very top of the slide, it says overnight arrivals to Belize. It doesn't say Ambergris Key. It's as a country, the whole market. Well, therein lies the problem. So I went to the Belize Tourism Board. I went to the director of the Belize Tourism Board. And I said, I need for you, please, if you would, to assist me by breaking out the numbers specifically for the #1 tourist destination, Ambergris Key. Because having the numbers for the country as a whole just doesn't nail it down. If you looked at the tourism numbers for Pennsylvania, does it give you an insight as to whether or not tourism is growing in Lancaster County or not? Well, no. You have to look at the specific market. So in this particular case, when I went to the Belize Tourism Board director, I said, could you please provide me with the numbers specifically for Ambergris Key? And they said, no. And I said, well, what do you mean no? They said, no, we don't calculate that. We don't tabulate that. I said, well, how come? I said, well, nobody's ever asked for it. I said, well, I'm asking for it. I said, well, nobody else has ever asked for it. I said, well, okay, let me explain how it would be beneficial. So I explained to them that there's a lot of work that I do as an unofficial ambassador helping to promote investment in Belize, and that even for my own benefit and that of my agents in my office, and even for my own investment, I'd like to know more specifically about our market. And they said, well, that could be an awful lot of work. I mean, where would we even start? And I said, well, when people arrive in the country and they fill out their arrival form and they go through passport control, they put on there where they're going, what hotel they're going to, where it is, what part of the country, if they're going to Ambergris Key, for example, and they said, oh, well, I guess you're right. So they realized that if they went back, they had all that documentation, all those records to go through, but it was going to take some time, and it did take some time, but I was able to convince them to do it, and this is what I'm excited to share with you. What I thought was a 19.33% increase was a 57.53% increase, 3 times the increase specific to Ambergris Key. Now, you'll see there it only says that it's for 2009 through 2012. Here it is, August of 2014, and they haven't gotten me the numbers yet for 2013. Because again, it's a labor-intensive effort. There's nobody else that's asked for this before. You can't get this information from anywhere but the source. And the raw data, the raw numbers are down here at the bottom. And I'll be happy to share this with anyone afterwards. So don't worry about trying to squint to see what the numbers are. I'll make it available through Dave, and anybody that wants to can have any components of this. So in any case, that was very exciting. I mean, that's what we call insider trading. Now on Wall Street, insider trading is illegal. In real estate, it's encouraged. And let me just be clear about that. I'm not suggesting illegality. I'm not promoting anything that's wrong or immoral. Insider trading is the ability to act on information that isn't publicly readily available in the marketplace. And within real estate, it is encouraged, it is desirable, and odds are very good that if you've made some good, sound real estate investments, I was just talking about an off-market deal. That's insider trading. The fact it didn't hit the MLS. So insider trading is the ability to have information about the marketplace and then to act upon it. But again, just to be real clear, there's a big difference in doing that on Wall Street versus doing it within real estate. So, first half of this year, almost 12% growth, 11.8%. We just got the statistics last month in July. So for the first half of this year, new all-time record. So 2011 was a record. Went up 16.3%, went up 6%, now up almost 12%. We're forecasted by the end of this year to be up over 14% for 2014. This just shows a chart, again, broken down by month, so you can just see how significant the growth is for the first half of this year. If you look at the percentage change on a month-to-month basis, of the first 6 months of the year, for the last 4 years, the least amount of growth we had was 30%. And that was in our busiest month of the year, when arguably there was the fewest number of rooms available to experience growth. So if you look at the months that weren't already the busiest, some of those had 39, 47% growth. The three biggest markets, the U.S. is the biggest market for tourism, and the 11.8% of visitors from the U.S. happens to match the 11.8% increase matches the overall increase. Europe is very interesting because 23% growth of European tourists year over year. First half of this year compared to first half of last year, 23% increase. And we'll touch on that here momentarily. If we take out the projection through the end of the year, based on what we have projected for the remaining 6 months, we start to see how the hockey stick shape comes into play. We're starting to see that significant geometric growth that I talked about. Now, everything that I've showed you up until now is historical, looking at 2011, 12, 13, and the first half of 2014. If I didn't have anything else to share other than that, that'd be pretty compelling from a tourism perspective. But I'm going to share with you some of the announcements that the airlines have made. Now, these are announcements made for new flights starting December of last year through December of this year. So this is just the added flights over a 12-month span. And the thing about the airlines you have to understand, we're going to focus on the three major carriers, American, which includes U.S. Airways, Delta, and United. The airlines do not take the position that if we fly it, they will come. It's not a field of dreams for the airlines. The airlines will only add flights when there's existing demand already in place. So when we see an airline add an additional route or add planes to an existing route, what that means is that there's already demand in the marketplace. So we'll let the airlines tell us exactly where the demand is. The first airline is American. American Airlines flies direct from Charlotte, Miami, and Dallas. In Dallas in particular, the demand is such that they're increasing from 3 flights a week to 7 flights a week. They're adding 4 flights every week from Dallas to Belize. That's an additional 640 passenger seats per week. Now, that's half the year. You'll notice that that's from June through November. November through May, they're already offering daily nonstop service because that's our quote-unquote high season. But what was our value season, or was considered our slower time of year, is no longer slower. We no longer have a slow time of year. So they're going daily service 7 days a week. Extra 640 seats. Delta Airlines. Last December, Delta started new nonstop flights from Los Angeles to Belize. This was a new route, a new hub. This was the first time we had direct flights from anywhere west of Houston or Dallas. And just in the last 2 weeks, or I guess actually it was in June here, Delta announced that they're increasing from 7 flights a week to 12 flights a week from Atlanta to Belize. So they're adding 5 additional flights a week. And what they're going to do is 5 days of the week they're going to fly twice a day. So that's a huge increase from Atlanta. So those from Atlanta and Los Angeles, that's an additional 960 seats every week to and from Belize. United Airlines last December increased from 1 flight a week from Newark, New Jersey to 4 flights a week. So they quadrupled the flights from Newark. And United just announced last month that they're going to start direct flights from Chicago to Belize starting this December. So United is adding 5 additional flights at 640 seats. If you have a scorecard and you're adding those up together, that's a total of 1,760 additional passenger seats per week to Belize. 70 to 75% of everybody going to Belize is headed to Ambergris Caye. So 70 to 75% of that number right there is the number of additional seats headed to Ambergris Caye, provided those flights are running full or close to capacity. Now, that's just the 3 major carriers in the market. So it's pretty telling that every airline in the market is adding flights like crazy. But what about other airlines? Well, according to the Minister of Tourism, who's also the Minister of Civil Aviation, and again, this is insider trading, but it's perfectly legal, there's 3 additional airlines that are going to begin direct flights to Belize between now and the end of the first quarter 2015. The first airline you've probably heard of, Southwest Airlines, the largest domestic carrier in the U.S. The second airline you've probably also heard of, JetBlue. JetBlue is going to start from at least one of their hubs, either Fort Lauderdale or Orlando, and possibly JFK as well. The third airline is out of Panama City, Panama, Copa. And even though Copa wouldn't mean much to us here in the US, Copa opens up all of South America to Belize for foreign investment. And it's also one more route for Europeans to be able to come to Belize without having to go through the US. Right now, Europeans can go through Cancun, Mexico, and now they can go through Panama City, Panama. And that's part of why we saw a 23% increase year over year in our European travelers, the new flights from Cancun, and we'll talk about that momentarily. In fact, we'll talk about it right now. Our local airline in Belize is called Tropic Air. Tropic Air has been adding planes to their fleet as fast as they can. In 2012, they had 10 aircraft. 2013, they added 2 more aircraft, increased their fleet 20%. They increased it another close to 20%. This year, going to 14 aircraft. They have 2 new aircraft on order. So we can see the extent to which they're going to invest in infrastructure because they see the tourism growth continuing. If you can make it out there, the box that's bolded in blue, well, first of all, the headline of the news article says, Tropic Air increases flights to Cancun to allow for same-day European connections. We saw that European travel was up 23% for the first half of this year. Starting in November 1st of this year, Tropic Air is going to increase their flights from 3 times a week to 9 times a week to Cancun, Mexico. And the whole goal of that is to open up the European market even further. So the airlines, again, it's so important to understand, the airlines don't sit around and say, well, let's add a flight and see what happens. They don't add the flights unless they know definitively. And where does their information come from? Their own reservation systems. They're not relying on third parties. They're looking at their own hard facts, their own hard data, and they're adding flights because they see exactly what's happening. Now, it's always important, any market you're investing in, to find out, are the local authorities, is the local government, or even the state government, does it favor foreign investment coming in? Is it incentivize investment? Is it neutral? Is it Switzerland? Or does it actually frown on foreign investment? It's important to know. Take the temperature of the government and what's their attitude, what's their perception. So in this particular case, the government in Belize announced in February of this year, and I don't have the photos in the presentation, but we actually, I just shared with Dave yesterday, we've got photos of this project well underway now, but it was only announced in February, a $30 million US infrastructure project for tourism infrastructure to do paved roads, water, and sewer. Now, $30 million US, the article says 60 million, but that's in Belize dollars, and it's a 2-to-1 exchange. So $30 million US may not sound like a lot of money from a tourism infrastructure initiative, but let's just put it in context. The total national debt of Belize as a country is $300 million, total national debt. This is the equivalent of investing 10% of the national debt in one tourism market. If the US government were to do the same thing proportionately, they would have to invest $1.7 trillion in Orlando, Florida. Now, that's not going to happen. But what's more interesting is why they're investing $30 million. This is the exact quote. This is the Prime Minister here pictured, and he, along with the Minister of Tourism, had this to say, and I'm going to read it word for word, then I'll kind of read between the lines. Having seen the multi-million-dollar investments made by the private sector, the government of Belize is committed to improve the tourism image of the island. Now, what's so fascinating about that, reading between the lines, here's an island that was acknowledged #1 in the world on TripAdvisor. The #1 place. And the government isn't saying, oh, well, we'll just rest on our laurels, everything's good, we're the best. They're saying, no, we're committed to improving the tourism image. We are committed to doing all we can to make it better and not rest on our laurels and just accept the status quo. And why? Because we see the multi-million-dollar investments from the private sector, and so we as government need to step up and do our job and support the private sector, just like happens here in the US. Or not. That's pretty important, though. That's pretty telling. I mean, if we're going to invest in a foreign market, we want to make sure we know what's the government's temperature. How do they feel about it? Well, this tells us how they feel about it. They're stepping up. And as of 2 days ago, there's incredible photos available showing the road infrastructure project and just how much is being accomplished, and they're way ahead of schedule. They had planned to have all the bids in by the end of third quarter and to start awarding bids the end of the fourth quarter, and the work is well underway and it's August. So that's just incredible. But it's also recognition that they have to act quickly because the tourism growth isn't hypothetical. It's real and it's now. And so they're taking action very, very quickly and very definitively. The end of last year, December of 2013, TripAdvisor came out with another list. This wasn't just islands. They came out with their list out of all the destinations in the world, everywhere you could go on vacation in the world. And they came up with the top 10 destinations on the rise, or the top 10 up-and-coming destinations. And Ambergris Caye was rated one of the top 10 destinations on the rise. So back to our Roy Rogers quote, find out where people are heading and invest there before they arrive. Up and coming means it's still before they arrive. And we're just being discovered now. Certainly there's more flights, certainly there's more awareness now than there was last year and the year before and the year before. But remember, we have a third of the population of Grand Cayman and Roatan, markets that are much more mature, markets that if we had invested in 10, 15, 20 years ago, we would have seen some incredible appreciation. We have that opportunity now as far as the stream of time. And in February of this year, TripAdvisor dropped another care package in our lap. They said that for the second year in a row, we're the #1 island in the world. So you can't buy that kind of recognition. You can't buy that kind of awareness, but it's been tremendous for us and it helps with the tourism growth. Now, tourism is our strongest foundation pillar, or it has been up until now, but I would say that tourism is going to be surpassed by the effect of the baby boomers. As strong as tourism is, the long-lasting effect of the baby boomers will be much greater, and I'll tell you exactly what I mean by that. So, same quote from Roy Rogers, but now we're going to look at it from the perspective of retirement or relocation. So the baby boomers are not a theory, they're not a hypothesis. If you look at the graph here, the years in red represent births between 1946 and 1964. It was an 18-year wave or cycle, the largest demographic wave to move through human history in any of our lifetimes, never to be repeated in any of our lifetimes. But this graph really doesn't show the immensity. It really doesn't help us to understand just how big a wave of people this is and how significant it is. If we can get ahead of this wave as investors, we'll never have an opportunity as good as this. This next graph, I think, will help to show it even better. On the far left, you see the number 7,000. At the start of 2011, which was the first year that the baby boomers started reaching the age of 65, there were 7,000 Americans a day reaching the age of 65. Just 2 years later, at the start of 2013, that number had gone up by 42.8% to 10,000 a day. 10,000 a day every day. I mean, do we all agree 42% is a pretty big increase in 2 years? Now get this. The average for the whole 18 years that goes from 2011 to 2029, the average is another 17.65% above where we are now. So picture it like this. If you've ever seen a river that's crested and gone above flood stage, the river has broken its banks. We're not quite at the high water mark, and the high water mark's going to stay there for 18 years. I mean, that's the reality. That's how significant these numbers are. The average for the 18 years is going to be 68% higher than we were in the year 2011. And that 68% increase is going to be every day for 18 years. It is a huge, huge number. Now, I'm not saying that everybody is going to relocate, but what they are doing is they're looking for desirable retirement destinations. It's the world's biggest game of musical chairs. If you look at every chair in this room as a place to retire, some people are going to stay right where they're at. They're perfectly content, and nothing wrong with that at all. However, there are going to be people who relocate, and some chairs are viewed as more desirable than others because they're places that have a better climate, better quality of life, better cost of living, whatever it might be. But it's the world's biggest game of musical chairs, and every year for 18 years there's more people coming in the game, and the number of chairs stay the same. Normally when you play musical chairs, you remove a chair every round, and that's how you reduce the number. This game of musical chairs is going to go for 18 years, and the chairs are all going to stay the same. We're just going to let more and more people in the game every year for 18 years. It's going to get harder and harder to find a chair, and the appreciation on some chairs is going to outpace that of others. Now, let's look at the actual numbers of how many do plan to relocate. So we've got our musical chair analogy. So we need our baseline. So to start with, 59% of baby boomers plan to relocate. Now, it's no surprise that Florida and Arizona are very high on the list. But we're interested in the other 28 million. 28 million Americans who plan to relocate, have active plans to go somewhere other than Florida and Arizona. Where are they going to go? Well, to start with, how many have already gone outside of the U.S.? Last year, 2013, there were 350,000 Americans collecting Social Security outside of the United States. That's worldwide. And that's not just in the year 2013, that's all the years cumulatively added up together. That's our baseline, that's our starting point. Now, according to multiple surveys by Zogby International, the Center for Medical Tourism Research in Austin, Texas, and others, the number of Americans who've already decided to retire abroad just in the next 10 years, not the whole 18-year wave, but just the next 10 years, is 10 times that number, 3.3 million. This is the wave, this is the flood or the high water mark on the river that I'm talking about. 10 times the number plan to retire abroad. But those are the ones who've already decided to go. There's another 17 million who are interested or very interested in moving abroad. Those numbers, I mean, 3.3 million and 17 million compared to 350,000. Now, where are they going to go? The number one most anticipated region for growth is Caribbean and Central America. In every poll that's been conducted since 2005. And every year since 2005, which is as far back as I was able to get data, every year the number has increased. Pre-recession, during the recession, post-recession, every year consistently more Americans plan to retire abroad than any year prior to that. It's a sentiment, it's a feeling. We're becoming more of a connected global economy, whether it's a combination of dissatisfaction with the U.S. economy or the U.S. government or just simply opportunities to explore the world. Whatever the reasons are, every year the number increases, but we're talking about truly astronomical figures. So it begs the question, look at the map there of Central America and the Caribbean. That's a huge region, lots of countries to choose from. How are people going to go about choosing where to go? They're going to make a list. Does that list look familiar? Now, I'm not saying they're going to reach the same conclusion that I did. I'm just saying they're going to likely go through the same process. 91% of them only speak English. Might they have a predisposition to look at a place that's English speaking? I would say so. It doesn't mean they're automatically going to go. It just means that it'll rank high on the list. Safety, security, property rights, stable economy, all the things that helped me to decide 9 years ago that Belize was the number one place to go, I would argue Belize will have a disproportionately higher number of people who choose to relocate and to retire there and to invest there for all the reasons that it brought me there 9 years ago. International Living Magazine said that Belize is the top English-speaking retirement haven in the Caribbean. And I don't think that you could say it any stronger than that. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. We could go down this list here. Taxes. There's no capital gains tax. There's no estate tax. When you own investment property, it's 1.75% is your tax rate. How many of you would trade your current tax rate on investment property for 1.75%? Yeah, that's what I thought, everyone. So banking, the highest reserve requirements of any central bank in the world. There's never been a bank failure in Belize. In fact, this will come into play when we talk about the contrarian pillar, so I'll just leave it for the moment, but we'll talk about banking just real briefly there. The Wall Street Journal had an article last summer, and it showed us where the 350,000 Americans that are retired abroad collecting Social Security are located. 1 in 7 are in Mexico. 50,000 Americans have retired to Mexico. 1/10 of that number, 5,000, have retired to Costa Rica. As of the end of 2011, which is when these statistics were in the article, 560 Americans receiving Social Security in Belize. 100 to 1 Americans in Mexico to Belize. Now, is there anything that's been happening in Mexico the last few years that might affect Americans' decisions to retire there or to feel that it's a safe place to go? I would say so if you've been following the news. I would say that there will be a disproportionate shift and that we won't see a 100 to 1 ratio of Americans retiring to Mexico now that Belize is being discovered. September of last year, the same magazine, Islands magazine, that said it was the number one island in the world to retire to back in 2009, said it's the best island to live on for retiring early. We see a consistent theme over and over and over. Now, the World Tourism Organization did a study, and just for a moment we're going to talk about how the baby boomers and tourism come together and how when you combine two different foundation pillars, what happens. In this particular case, the baby boomers are expected to double the size of the tourism industry. If you think about it, people have parents and children and siblings and grandchildren, and when they go somewhere, they're going to want to have all those people come and visit them. So if baby boomers are retiring to a particular destination, it's going to increase tourism, and the study shows it's going to double the size of the tourism industry. But our concern, as well as what I call cannibalization, in Belize, we have the baby boomers who are coming to buy a place to live in for half of the year, part of the year, or just to relocate and live there full time. So say somebody comes and they buy a little green house, and that little green house was being rented out on a nightly basis by the previous owner, who was a real estate investor. So the investor owned this little condo and he rented it out every night, but the new owners buy it and they move in, they're going to live in it. So it's no longer available for rental. So our rental inventory just dropped by 1. We went from 2,000 rooms down to 1,999. But all those people, the little people you see there at the bottom, those numbers are growing by 16% and 6% and 12%. So what's happened is we have two different markets competing for the same inventory. We've got baby boomers coming in and buying up what was being rented out nightly, and it's no longer being made available for rental. So let me ask you this. In 2012, we said we needed 326 more condos or hotel rooms or villas or combination thereof. And we only built 30 units. We only had 30 new units. Do you think there might have been more than 30 baby boomers that bought in the year 2012? Something to move into and live in? In our office, we had more than 30, which means we actually decreased in inventory in 2012. I said that the demand outstripped supply 10 to 1. That was if, in fact, we had 30 more rental units. We didn't. We lost all 30 of those and then some. This is where the real opportunity is. We are losing rental inventory to the baby boomer wave that is going to keep buying for 15 more years and simply can't build fast enough. We're seeing occupancy rates in excess of 90% on an annualized basis at every property in the market. Our performance that we're going to talk about as far as investor return, we don't even contemplate what would happen based on a 90% occupancy because the numbers are frankly too high. You'd be concerned about the risk factor if the projected return is as high as that. And so, but the reality is for 2 years, the bathtub has been overflowing. We have more people coming in the market than we have rooms for, and the best analogy is that the bathtub is overflowing. So the last pillar, and I've already talked about it, so I'll just touch on it real briefly, the exodus of capital. This is my office right across from the airstrip in San Pedro. In fact, it's the first thing you see when you get off the plane, and that's on purpose. And in 2009, in the heart of the recession, we had people coming in our office every day saying, I just lost 30%, 40% of my portfolio. I just lost 30 or 40% of my IRA, my 401k, my mutual funds. I can't retire. I got to work another 10, 15 years now. And I want to take control of my financial future. I can't afford to let this happen again. We still had the same market we did before. We still had people buying second homes and third homes and vacation homes and investment property. All those buyers still kept coming in 2009. But all of a sudden we had new investors coming in saying, I want to buy a real asset in a strong market where I can be certain it's not going to depreciate or devalue, where there's a strong banking system, where there's no underwater properties, where there's no bogus banking or economy as I saw with the U.S. banking crisis in the U.S. And so being a T8 tax haven, one of the top 8 tax havens in the world, having the strongest reserve requirements of any central bank in the world, we saw a tremendous amount of the $3 trillion U.S. that was sitting on the sidelines outside of the stock market. A tremendous amount of capital left the U.S. and came to Belize, came into the banks, came into the real estate market. People bought real estate treating it like a Swiss bank account or a safety deposit box or like buying a bar of gold. They wanted to buy real assets because what they said is, John, I'm not so concerned about the return on my investment. I'm concerned about the return of my investment. And right now, I don't feel that if I put it in paper assets, that it'll necessarily be there. And so I want to buy something that I know isn't going to go down. It's not going to evaporate. It's not going to disappear. It's not going to drop 30%. And so in 2009, did we have a drop in tourism during the recession? Yes, absolutely. We dropped 2%. The rest of the Caribbean dropped 20%, we dropped 2%. But it was negative, we did drop. But the point being that when our tourism went down, this contrarian pillar, the exodus of capital, caused us to have record real estate sales in 2009. Property values, the highest appreciation, and the most sales ever were during the recession. And it'll happen again during the next recession. We all have a tendency to look at something like a recession or a major correction and assume that every market everywhere is affected the same. It's not. Same amount of money in the world, it just changes pockets. It goes to different markets. If there's a downturn here, the money's going to go elsewhere. And in this particular case, it's going to seek a safe refuge, a safe harbor, and that's going to be banking and tax havens. And Belize is considered one of the foremost banking and tax havens in the world. So, I told you I started the story by telling you about my son Trent walking by at the age of what I thought was 5, but was actually 8 years of age. My son is responsible for us being in Belize, and for that I'll forever be grateful because of just him walking by the home office that day. This photo right here was taken last month. That's my son on the right. That's a 70-pound grouper that we caught. We were diving for lobster. We caught 50 lobster that day and then decided to do a little spearfishing because you can't just have lobster when you do a beach barbecue. You gotta, well, just like here at Shady Maple, you got a choice, right? So we had to add some grouper to the menu along with the lobster. So we speared a 70-pound lobster there. And then that's my youngest daughter, Lauren, there on the far left. She just turned 9 years old. So the project is called Mahogany Bay Village. And what we did, remember the numbers that I shared with you? 670 rooms turned into 2,000 rooms. What's the remainder if you take 670 from 2,000? Who's quick with math? 2,000 minus 670 equals 1,330. So 1,330 rooms or units were built in a 6-year period. How many were condos and how many were hotel rooms? That'd be a good question to ask, right? Out of 1,330 units, 30 were hotel rooms. 1,300 condos and villas, 30 hotel rooms is all the hotel rooms that have been built in the last 6 years. Guess what the first thing people ask for when they go to make a reservation? A hotel room. Every time. Why is nobody building hotel rooms? Why is everybody building condos? That's where answering that question answers the opportunity. There's no construction financing in Belize. If I own a piece of land and I want to build a 100-room hotel, I have to build the 100-room hotel entirely out of pocket, all cash. Do all landowners have the money to do that? No. The same landowner says, okay, I don't have the money to build 100 hotel rooms. What if I built condos instead? With condos, I can build with OPM, other people's money. In fact, what I could do is I could do staged payment sales. I'll let you put 10% down. Here's the renderings. Pick your condo, put 10% down, and I'll let you make staged payments during construction. And that way, if I have the land, I might even have the land leveraged or financed, but I can build condos by doing staged payments. And that's what's happened. Almost every single, in fact, one condo developer added 17 hotel rooms to the 60 condos at his property and ironically kept the hotel rooms. He'd sold all the condos, but he built and kept 17 hotel rooms because he saw that everybody that called in requesting was asking for hotel rooms and he had none. So of the 30 hotel rooms, 17 were added to a condo development. The other 13 was a small 13-room high-end boutique hotel. They're $800 rooms. They're not mass market rooms. So nobody has built for the demand of the market, which is simply hotel inventory. Now, the average nightly rate on Ambergris Key for last year was $215 a night. In the luxury hotel industry in the US, the average last year was $165. Our average of $215 a night is everything from 1-star to 5-star. That's a 2-star average, this $215 a night. It's a very, very high dollar market, a high margin market, meaning high profitability. So what we set out to do was to say, if nobody's building hotels, that's what needs to be built. And we need to do it in such a way that we can address specifically the needs of the market as far as tourism, but we also want to do a mixed-use development so we can also address the demands of the baby boomers who are looking for places to relocate and retire to. But instead of just building condos and trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, let's build a resort for the tourism market and let's build residences for the retiree, the relocation market. Let's build specific for both markets. So In this picture, the arrow is pointing to Mahogany Bay Village. Mahogany Bay Village is 67 acres. It's a huge parcel of land. 67 acres, every bit of which is Caribbean Sea frontage, canal access to the Caribbean Sea, 3 minutes by boat from anywhere in the development to the wide open Caribbean Sea. It's 1 mile of paved road from the airstrip, the bullseye, the point of entry to the island, to the gated entrance to the development. You're going to see some photos here to follow. There's $30 million of infrastructure and development in the subdivision and in the ground at this point in time, and no debt. No debt, no mortgage, no liens against any of it. $30 million. That's an incredible statement to be able to make. And I'll show you some of the progress photos. So this photo here was taken earlier this year. This was in, I believe it was January, February of this year. Same with this photo here. This was in May. This was last week. There's 100 units, 100 doors on the ground. Once we hit 126 doors, it'll be the largest resort in the country of Belize. And it's truly astounding. We have a production building facility on the mainland in Belize, in Belmopan, where the capital is located. That's where the lumber mills are. There are 2 forests in Belize that are certified by the World Forestry Council as sustainable forestry. And we purchase 100% of their production. We employ 1% of the male workforce in the country of Belize. So we can actually say that we reduce unemployment by 1% among the male adult population. Our construction development manager has built 3 Four Seasons hotels, 2 Ritz-Carlton hotels, and over 3,000 single-family homes in the southeastern United States. We've taken, on average in Belize, a new resort development takes 3 years from start of construction to occupancy. 3 years. We're able to deliver turnkey, finished inventory in 12 weeks, 3 months. Everything you see in this photo was built in the last 12 months. The first groundbreaking was August of last year, August of 2013. I'm going to take you through the different product types, show you what the different product types are, the construction, the interior, the furnishings, and you'll see exactly. But it's amazing. This next photo here as well, this photo was just taken last week as well. And it's just the immensity and the velocity is just tremendous. So this is an overall site plan for Mahogany Bay Village. The part that you see outlined is the resort, and the resort is what we're building first. There's 195 rooms in the resort core, and we've got 100 of them on the ground. So we've got about 130 out of the 195 that are already either under contract or closed. We're well ahead of schedule. Our target was to be at about 60 rooms or 60 doors by this point in time, and we're at about 130, so we're about double where we expected or hoped to be. If we zoom in a little bit closer, and of course the surrounding area, this is a mixed-use village. It's a Caribbean village community. The same architectural team that we use developed Schooner Bay in Abaco in the Bahamas. They did Camana Bay in Grand Cayman, Rosetown in Jamaica, Alice Beach, and Sunrise in Florida. So this is a concept that's proven, that they've done over and over, time and time again throughout other Caribbean locales. And so it'll consist of a resort. There'll be 8 to 10 restaurants, farmers market, a residential, commercial, retail. It'll be an entire village community, all mixed use together. So as we zoom in, this is a close-up of Street 2 and Street 3. This is the initial resort inventory. This is where the photos that I just showed you were taken from. We see here the Bay Club at the bottom. The Bay Club is going to have sunset views over Mahogany Bay. Mahogany Bay will have a marina open to the Caribbean Sea. This is the initial rendering and floor plan. We actually just had our resort operator and our architectural team down last week, and they've subsequently revised this plan. They've expanded it tremendously, so the Bay Club is going to be larger. It's also going to have facilities for wedding and receptions. We have a lot of wedding parties in Ambergris Caye and very few facilities that are designated to handle them. Our first retail operation is the Rum and Bean. The Rum and Bean is a gourmet coffee shop and rum bar, and it's pictured there on the left. Our sales center is there on the right. This is an artist rendering showing the British colonial architecture. Everything possible has been sourced in Belize. So local Belizean hardwoods, as much as possible, everything sourced within the country, and I'll show you actual photos to follow of the different product types. So what Dave has done is to put together a 3-lot syndication. Each lot is a different configuration. There are 3 different configurations available, and so his syndication takes advantage of the diversification of having one of each product type. So the first product type are the garden cottages. A garden cottage lot consists of 3 detached cottages on one legally subdivided parcel of land. Those 3 cottages are each about 400 square feet. We'll take a look at some interior photos here momentarily. But you have 3 garden cottages, and those are hotel rooms. They're individual cottages that are rented out as nightly rentals. 2 of our most popular resorts on island are Mata Chica and Victoria House. This particular unit type typically rents for $325 to $375 a night. Our projections are based on a much lower figure because, again, we're trying to underpromise and overdeliver. But within the market, consistently, this is one of the most popular hotel unit types in our market. This is what they look like with 3 of them on one lot in what we call a cottage court, where you have 3 cottages facing 3 cottages with an open space between them. This is the reality. There's 3 of them built. You see the mirror reflection in the canal in front of them. And then this is what they look like on the inside. So you see the beautiful Belizean hardwoods, about 6 different Belizean hardwoods used in construction. These have a 14-foot ceiling. All of the units are air conditioned with split AC units, but they're designed architecturally to maximize the trade winds. We have nice sea breezes off the Caribbean, and so they're designed to be able to open the louvered windows and not have to use the AC. You might have about 2 months of the year when you would want to use the AC, and the rest of the year you'd be perfectly comfortable just enjoying the sea breeze. But it's entirely up to the guests staying there. If they want to run the AC all the time, then they're welcome to do so. So these are a king-size bed, again, same garden cottage. More photos. It has a nice veranda to the front. Then we have a larger product type called the family cottage. The family cottage is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It's 1,200 square feet. And this particular lot configuration has 1 family cottage and then 2 what we call guest studios, which are effectively the garden cottage that I just showed you. So this gives us tremendous diversity. It allows us to rent anything from a hotel room to a 5-bedroom house. Somebody can rent the house by itself as either a 2 or a 3-bedroom house, or they can rent the house plus a cottage, and the cottage can serve as a satellite bedroom. So if you rent the house in 1 cottage, you have a 4-bedroom. If you rent the house in 2 cottages, you have a 5-bedroom. So it gives us a lot of flexibility from a rental standpoint. This has been an extremely popular lot configuration. This is what the family cottage looks like. The veranda, living room, vaulted ceilings, open to the dining area and kitchen, seating for 8. The 2nd bedroom is a king-size bed. There's a king-size master suite as well. You see the 2nd bedroom there just off the living room. And then our 3rd unit type is called the keeping suite. And the keeping suite, for lack of better description, is a 4-plex. This is what it looks like as a rendering with the buildings on a corner lot, but they're typically built side by side as you see photographed here. So the keeping suites is 4 individual units, like I said, a 4-plex, and each unit is essentially a 1-bedroom apartment or a 1-bedroom condo. So the lower unit has 2 full-size beds in the bedroom. It has a separate kitchenette, dining area, and study, and an outdoor living room. This is the outdoor living area here. This is another view of you see the kitchenette in the background opening up to the outdoor living room. So this is the downstairs. You've got your dining area and study there to the left. The upstairs has a king-size bed instead of 2 full-size beds, and instead of an outdoor living room, it has a glass-enclosed indoor-outdoor living room. So it's got a little different functionality because of being closed in with the glass louvers. So those are our different unit types or different configurations. We'll talk specifically about the numbers in just a moment. I've got a couple of slides I want to share with you here that are from a gentleman named John Bowens. I work very, very closely with John. He's with a company called Equity Trust, located in Ohio. And what John does is help to work with people using self-directed IRAs. So I mention this to you because this is an investment that is open to the use of retirement funds. You are able to use self-directed IRAs. You can roll over 401ks or existing IRAs to be self-directed. If you're not familiar, if you have questions about the process or how to do that, John is the National Education Specialist for Equity Trust. Now, Equity Trust It's a $100 billion industry, the self-directed IRA industry, and Equity Trust manages 12 of the $100 billion. They are huge within their space. They have 130,000 clients in all 50 states, and last year they processed over 24,000 real estate transactions using self-directed IRAs. Because of the volume of work that I do with them, John is the personal liaison that I can put you in touch with. Ordinarily, with him being in charge of their national education program, he doesn't deal individually with clients, but they actually have a team assigned to work with me and those that I refer to them. So John would be the point of contact, and I'm going to go through these just to get to his contact information. This is just a slide from irs.gov. Sometimes if you talk to Fidelity or Vanguard or whoever your mutual fund or 401k or IRA custodian might be, they might tell you that you can't invest in real estate with your IRA. What they really mean is you can't invest with them in real estate with your IRA. In fact, what this quote says is that IRA, actually I can't even read, it's too small. It says IRA trustees are permitted to impose additional restrictions on investments. For example, because of administrative burdens, many IRA trustees do not permit IRA owners to invest IRA funds in real estate. IRA law does not prohibit investing in real estate, but trustees are not required to offer real estate as an option. This is from the IRS government website. The reason that your custodian at Vanguard or Fidelity or any of the others are not going to allow you to invest in real estate is they don't earn any fees off of it. They don't get paid, and therefore they only get compensated by selling you the mutual funds or the investments that are specifically designated for their fund or the retirement portfolio. So that's why you need to work with a self-directed IRA custodian, because they're on a transactional or on a fee basis per transaction. It's a couple $100 to set up a self-directed IRA, and you have the flexibility to invest in a whole host of things. So regardless of whether you choose to invest in this or not, this is just valuable information for you. The list of things that you cannot invest with a self-directed IRA is very short. You can invest in almost anything using self-directed IRA funds, but talk to your professional. It's a 3-step process. You open and fund the account, identify and direct the investment, and then the expenses are paid from the IRA and the revenue returns to the IRA. John's information, if you want to take it down, it's j.bowens, B-O-W-E-N-S, at trustetc.com. Their website is trustetc.com. If you want to contact John, if you have any questions, just tell him that John Turley had referred you to him. Otherwise, he'll just think it's spam and not know who you are and may not respond. But he's extremely helpful. If you simply have questions, and again, it doesn't have to have anything to do with Belize. He deals with transactions in all 50 states, and as I said, they're custodians for $12 billion of managed retirement funds. So the investment itself, I'm going to invite Dave up here to come up. I'm just going to mention that it's a 3-lot syndication, so there's 1 Keeping Suites lot, 1 family cottage lot, and 1 garden cottage lot. And where we stand today, as of the 3rd week of August 2014, is 2 of the 3 syndications are full. They're fully funded, they're completed, they're closed, they've been built. The 3rd and final lot is what is available and what we're talking about tonight. It's the last lot available at the first phase of pricing, meaning that there's built-in phased equity to be involved at the current phase. So I'll be very, very candid. I'm not telling you that there won't be additional investment opportunities in the future, because there will be. Dave does intend to do future syndications. But to be very clear about it, there won't be any that have the benefit of the current phase pricing that Dave locked in quite some time ago. So there's a significant reason to be involved in this 3rd and final lot within the initial syndication. Dave, do you want to come on up?
Yeah, so of the 3-lot syndication that I put together, like John said, 2 of the lots are funded. There is 1 lot left that is not. So there is room for individual investors. Somebody wants to get into the deal. Minimum investment at $50,000. I'm going to hand out there is some investors in the room already, but I'm going to hand out papers
to those of you guys that are interested in the deal, I just want to make sure that everybody in here has the opportunity. And
why don't you hand those out and I'll explain
Sure.
them as you do that. So I'm just going to put a slide up here. One of the questions that often comes up in these presentations, and I'm going to just preempt the answer by putting up where this says investment options. We've had numerous people, not just at this presentation previously in February, but in other presentations around the country, people have said, well, it sounds great. What if I don't want to be in the syndication? What if I'd like to take down my own lot, buy my own lot, or myself and a couple of friends or partners might want to go in together and actually do our own investment outside of the syndication. Can we do that? Most people would expect that the answer is no. You need to work through Dave. You've got to invest through his syndication. That's the only means by which you can come into the opportunity. Frankly, the answer is absolutely yes, you can. Dave's very open to that. He's not selfish about this at all. Dave's foremost objective is to help to share the opportunity that he has found, to share the market that he has found, to share the wealth of experience that he's garnered over the years as a successful real estate investor, and to see that others can benefit from that. So, having said that, the syndication has a $50,000 minimum participation. I just want to explain what the term syndication means for some of you that may be a new term, and I don't want to take anything for granted. A syndication, a real estate syndication, means that you syndicate or bring together a multitude of investors to be able to leverage into a deal that you otherwise couldn't afford to do on your own. For example, let's say that I could afford to buy a duplex or a fourplex, but I can't afford to buy a 100-unit apartment building, and I certainly can't afford to buy a 500-unit apartment building. But when I do my research, I find that a 500-unit apartment building has much better efficiency, better economies of scale, and typically better returns than a duplex or a fourplex. A 500-unit apartment building has professional on-site management, where if I buy a fourplex, I got to manage it myself because I don't have enough return to hire a full-time property manager for my fourplex. So I say to myself, how do I get to invest in the 500 units even though I don't have enough money? Well, I participate in a syndication. The syndication brings similar like-minded people together. Together we pool our resources, and we're able to make an investment in something that yields a higher return and has higher efficiency and higher economies of scale than what we could do on our own. So what Dave has done is he has absorbed the legal fees and done all the registration with the SEC to do what's called a private placement memorandum to provide the executive summary and the offering documents so that you can participate and invest in an LLC that has been formed that would own these cash flow producing assets in Belize. And then the distribution, the cash flow is distributed quarterly through the LLC, which Dave is tasked with the responsibility of managing. So he would be issuing the cash distributions on a quarterly basis as per the instructions that you would provide. So if somebody wants to participate in the syndication, it's a $50,000 minimum investment. You can use either personal funds or you can use self-directed IRA funds. If there's an investment of $150,000 or more, then you have the added benefit of 1 week of annual personal usage in either a garden cottage or a keeping suite. But that's provided that it's personal funds, not a self-directed IRA. And that's simply because of the law. You can't have personal use and enjoyment with your retirement funds. It's just the way that it works. But it's approximately, at stabilization, within the first year of rental operations, it's about a 10% conservatively projected return. Now it's important to understand that that's unleveraged. That's with no debt, with no bank financing. So at stabilization, about a year after we've opened for rental operations and we've got everything kind of stabilized and running smoothly, it's about a 10%, 10 to 11% projected cash-on-cash return. The objective, though, is that within the first 5 years, that we're able to, based on the proven track record of the income, to use the income approach for an appraisal and to do cash back, cash out financing and to return 100% of the investor equity within 5 years. So hypothetically, you've invested $100,000 in the investment. The goal is that within 5 years, you would have the return of 100% of your capital. 100% of your $100,000 would be returned to you and to all of the other investors, but you would now continue to own the asset, and the asset would generate enough cash flow well above and beyond the debt service such that you have income in perpetuity indefinitely. Your return on investment effectively becomes infinite because you've returned all of your investor capital, and yet you still have the cash flow coming in. Now, having said that, we've spoken with several potential lenders in the United States and in other jurisdictions, all of whom have said they're extremely interested. The reason being, banks in Belize require 40% down payment, and banks in Belize are 10 to 10.5% interest. Now, even with those terms, the return goes up dramatically if we were to put financing on this with the Belize banks. However, if we simply wait 1 year after rental operations commence, we've got a number of lenders that we've already spoken with who've expressed a great deal of interest in doing, for example, a 70 or 75% loan-to-value ratio, 7 or 8% interest, which is much better than Belize, but also much better than they can get here in the US. And they've expressed to us that they can raise several $100 million to do takeout financing on those terms. The return, just so that we understand, there's no promise of return being given, but the return goes from a projected approximately 10% to about a 42% if you were to put 8% financing at a 70% loan to value. So it's absolutely our objective to be able to make financing available, and that would be at the discretion of the manager, in this case Dave, to make the decision based on the management of the investment in terms of what the highest and best use would be. So the goal would be to return 100% of the equity. That would allow that equity to be made available to you to invest in another syndication or to do whatever you might choose to with it. You could simply put it in the bank or put it under your mattress or whatever it might be. But the point being that you would be able to have the access to that capital. There would therefore be no risk to that capital, but you would have the cash flow that's derived. So anytime you can achieve a desirable rate of return and have it be in an unleveraged position, you've achieved the perfect scenario, because you can't get any worse than unleveraged. Most deals are contingent upon having the right financing. Most deals, if you don't have the right interest rate or the right terms, it's the difference between positive and negative cash flow. To be in a market where we consistently, and I do this daily, and I have dozens of properties on which I have a proven track record in history, we can deliver a double-digit return with no leverage, no financing. There's no market in the United States that you can consistently do that. But in this market you can. And with the flights on American, United, Delta, Southwest, JetBlue, and Copa, the future looks pretty bright. And it certainly is a case of being in the right place at the right time. So what Dave is going to hand out, or did you already do that? Wow, that was stealth. I didn't even notice. Dave has just handed out a non-binding letter of commitment. And let me define non-binding. It's non-binding in both directions. So what this is you may have had some familiarity with Belize, you may have had no familiarity with Belize, but I'm going to venture to say that you probably know more about this market and this opportunity than anything in your 401k, your IRA, or any mutual funds that you've invested in during your life. Most of you probably have investments that you don't know nearly as much about as you now do about this market. So what you have in front of you is a letter of commitment. There's not enough room for everybody in the room to participate, and there are others outside of the room who are also looking as well. But the intent is to fill and fund this syndication, and then Dave is going to move on to the next syndication, but again, it won't be at the same price point. So this is for you to express, A, your interest in participating, subject to and conditional upon your review of the executive summary and the offering documents. Because quite frankly, you have to review those, and you don't necessarily have those yet. So the goal is, if you'll fill out the letter of commitment, if you think that you're interested, subject to your reviewing, you can review the documentation and say, hey Dave, thanks very much, but I've reviewed it, I've decided not to move forward. That's perfectly acceptable. But in order for Dave to set aside space for you, he respectfully requests that you please fill it out and turn it in this evening, and then he can follow up with you individually. If you turn in the letter of commitment, he'll then provide you with the executive summary and the offering documents. It's non-binding in the other direction, because you may express a willingness or desire to invest $100 or $150 or $200,000 in the syndication, and Dave may very well come back and say, I'd like to have you come in at a lesser amount so I can have more people be able to take advantage of it, but I would allow you to roll over into the next syndication with the remainder of the investment. So that's where I want to make clear it's non-binding in both direction, because Dave has the discretion of determining how much to place you in this syndication, and you have the opportunity to decide whether it's right for you or not based on... I was going to actually add slides up here. In fact, I have one right here. I know you can't see this from where you're sitting. This is a very, very detailed analysis that we put together to show the purple column that, I know, again, you can't see the numbers. The purple column shows what we consider to be realistic projections. The projections that are in the executive summary that you'll receive from Dave show a 72% annual occupancy. A 72% annual occupancy and an average daily rate of $210 a night. That's less than what the average was for all properties on the island last year. Now, we're building a 4 to 5 star property. The average property on island is a 2-star property. And we're showing that we're going to have the same room rate as a 2-star property. Does that mean we're going to have the same room rate? Absolutely not. It's a case of under-promise and over-deliver. There's not a single property on the island that is running at a 70% occupancy. But our projection is based on a 72% occupancy because, again, we'd rather under-promise and over-deliver. If we just go from a 72% to an 86% occupancy, we go from an 11% to a 14% return. Going in the other direction, we say to ourselves, what if we have a significant market downturn? What if we go through another mini recession? What would happen if we were at 50% occupancy? Now, I have to tell you, during the recession in 2009, we were in the 70s. The worst year, we were in the 70 percentile, which is where I have us projected conservatively. But what if we went to the 50s? At a 52% occupancy, it'd be a 7% cash-on-cash return. Are there some of you in the room who own investment property that doesn't yield a 7% cash-on-cash return? The truth is yes. I was just in Miami a couple weeks ago. It's a 2 or 3% cap rate in Miami right now. I did the calculation to see how badly this investment would have to perform to match the Miami market. We would have to do a 22% occupancy. In order for the #1 island in the world, the #1 tourist destination in the Caribbean, the #1 island in the world to retire to do a 22% occupancy is incomprehensible. The fact is, it's an incredibly special market at an incredibly special time. To have a market coming into the age of discovery as a top tourism destination, to be English speaking, and to have it coincide with the growth and the boom of the baby boomers isn't going to happen again in any of our lifetimes. We can all look back on Aspen, Colorado, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Hilton Head, South Carolina, San Jose, California. You can pick real estate markets all over the place that you could say, if you could go back 20 years ago and invest, how well would you have done? 20 years from now, people will look back to Ambergris Caye in 2014 and ask that same question. You can be on the right side of history. So I would encourage you to fill out the letter of commitment, turn that into Dave this evening. You can change your mind as to the amount. You can change your mind upon the review of the documents, but that gives him a starting point to know who to start with for follow-up. And at this point, I'd like to open it up for questions. I'm sure that there probably are some. Yes, Willie?
For example, in my case, if I was to do this, I would be leveraging like a self-directed IRA.
Mm-hmm.
When you talked about, I guess, leveraging, like if there was some financing available, how would that play out with someone who has a self-directed IRA?
Great question. So the only difference there is that if there's let's say there's a cash out refinance in 2 years' time, initially, because your self-directed IRA funds would be going towards an unleveraged investment, there would be no consideration whatsoever. But if it ends up being a financed or a leveraged investment, the first thing is that all of the money that's returned back to you goes back into your IRA, and then of the money that comes in from a cash flow basis, the percentage that comes about from the financing is subject to what's called UBIT, which is a taxation on the funds that are a result of the finance portion, but the return that comes from the self-directed IRA itself is tax deferred, is non-taxed. So the good news for you, if you're using a self-directed IRA, is that until such time as you refinance, all of the equity that's returned to you and all of the cash flow, all of the cash return, all goes into your self-directed IRA completely tax advantaged or tax deferred. Okay. And there's you don't have a penalty for there being financing in place, provided that there is financing that's put into place down the road. Okay. Yes, you're about to ask a question.
What's the target stabilization date for these lots?
That's a great question. It would be within 1 year of resort opening. Our resort operator, our hotel operator, was just down on the island about 2 weeks ago. I spent a week with them, and we've hired a third-party hotel consultancy firm. It's the largest hotel consultancy firm in the world. It's a $30,000 study that they just are going to be releasing to us this week. And what our intent was to say, we're doing 195 rooms in the first component or the first phase. We know the market needs far more than that, but we wanted them to come in and tell us specifically how we should phase in the next phase of rooms beyond 195 to ensure that we wouldn't have any absorption issues with regard to our first phase of investors. What we don't want to do is build more rooms than we have absorption for and actually see a drop in initial occupancy while it's being reabsorbed within the marketplace. So that's why we've kind of capped this first phase at 195. We'll have the results of that study this week, but preliminarily they've told us that they feel that if we had 400 rooms today, then we would be able to fill those just based on existing market demand without the additional airlines. They weren't aware of Southwest, JetBlue, and Copa, but just simply the existing passenger load. They feel that right now, without the extra flights from American, Delta, and United, that we need 400 rooms in the marketplace to absorb the people that are being turned away. That's where that analogy of the bathtub overflowing comes in. Imagine you go away on vacation and you come home and the bathtub has the stopper in it and it's 3/4 full. You say to yourself, oh, thank goodness we got back in time. You know, the tub's filled up, but it hasn't overflowed. Once it's overflowed, what's the question you have to ask yourself? If you get home from vacation and the tub's overflowing, what question do you have?
How long?
How long? How long has it been doing that? Did it just run over, or did it run over 4 days ago? In our market right now, the bathtub's been overflowing for 2 years. There are people who are able to book flights and then find out that every hotel is oversold. So what do? They go to the mainland. They go stay in a different part of Belize. Then we have people that can't book flights or hotels, so they defer their trip and they have to go somewhere else instead. So the estimation is that we need 400 hotel rooms just to absorb the people that are being turned away, let alone to encompass any of the growth that's coming forward. But to go back to answering your question, I would count on stabilization as being 1 year from resort opening, with resort opening happening sometime in hopefully early 2015, first part of 2015. What's critical for us for resort opening is that we've already met the threshold or the goal as to how many residential units, how many doors we open with. Our consultants had said, don't open with less than 60 doors. We also need to have food and beverage operations. We have the first one open, the Rum and Bean, but we want to have another full-service restaurant open. And we also want to have the Bay Club, which is our infinity edge pool with the sunset views over Mahogany Bay, and to have the pool open. The reason for our resort operators being down was for them to tell us, based on their experience, they manage several boutique properties throughout the United States, and they wanted to give their input as to some of the factors and the amenities that were included in the Bay Club. And so they came down, and this week we're meeting with them and the architectural design team in Boston, and we'll have the final plan for the Bay Club, and we'll be able to start construction on that. And probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll have a much more definitive timeline in terms of opening date and projected stabilization date. Other questions? You've all done, I really applaud you. I didn't see too many heads nodding off. It's always tough. Everybody eats a big full meal and then try and stay awake for some guy talking about the other side of the world. Yes?
Dave, what type of units are you putting on this third phase?
Garden cottages.
They're going to be
Three
garden
garden
cottages.
cottages. So we'll have a mix, one of each.
It's important to note, I'm glad you asked that question, because the way that the syndication is set up, it was what's called a min-max, a minimum-maximum. So it's a 1-lot minimum, 3-lot maximum. So the other 2 lots that are already funded, that people have already invested in, once the 3rd lot closes, you're sharing in the profits and losses of all 3 lots proportionately. The reason for that, and it's beneficial that way, is Dave chose to do one of each of the 3 lot configurations so you have diversification. We can estimate and project what the rental rates will be and which ones will have a greater demand, but the best diversification, the best bucket, so to speak, is to have a little bit of all of them. And so it's been structured exactly that way. Any additional questions?
John, you mentioned in, I think it was 2013, there was an additional 30 rooms built.
In 2012 there were, yeah.
Okay, so how about 13 and 14?
2013 there were less than 20 new units. If you have pen and paper, I'll give you the total inventory of everything under construction on the island. And it's not going to take an hour. It'll take 2 minutes. But if you have pen and paper, there's a condo development called Diamante, which is 20 condos. They are forecast to have the first 8 condos open in 2 years' time. And there's no timeline on the other 12. There's a project called The Residences at Barrier Reef. They're building 48 condos, 1, 2, and 3-bedroom condos. Their target opening date is December 2016, 2.5 years. Venecia del Caribe, 86 condos, the first of which are scheduled to open in 3 years. And it'll be 3 to 5 years for all 86 condos to be built out. And Grand Bayman, 16 condos, 2.5 years. They're just breaking ground now, 2.5 years till completion. And that's everything that's under construction on the island, other than Mahogany Bay Village. There are no other hotel rooms under construction. There's no other hotel project on the drawing board. If we wanted, or you wanted, to go and buy a piece of land and build a hotel starting tomorrow, based on what you've learned here in the room tonight, if you could find the land and close on it, you would then do what's called an environmental impact assessment that you would submit to the Department of Environment along with your building and development plans. They would come back and tell you exactly what's approved and what's not, what you have to change. They'll then provide you with what's called an ECP, an environmental compliance plan. And from the time you first start the process until you start building is going to be about 3 years. So if somebody decided to build a hotel today, based on the information I shared with you, we have a 3-year head start before they would begin construction. And if they're not using the production building methodology that we've employed, that we've brought from the US and we've trained the local Belizean people how to use, then it's going to be another 3 years of construction time, as you see with these other projects. It's incomprehensible that we not only have this big of a jump on the competition, but that we have so little other competition. Every one of those other projects that I mentioned to you fits the profile exactly. They are developers who are building condos. They own the land and nothing more. And they're building the condos based on other people's money. And they also are building condos because, quite frankly, there are a lot of people coming in the market looking for a second home, a retirement home, a place to spend part of the year, half the year, or all of the year. What's going completely unfulfilled is the hotel inventory. Now, the most important question nobody has asked yet. Would you like me to tell you what it is? The question, I'm going to challenge that somebody may have already thought of this, but they just haven't articulated it. We've talked about the airlines. We haven't talked too much about hotels other than to say that nobody's building them. The airlines, would you say the airlines are bullish or bearish? They're pretty bullish, right? I mean, they're adding flights left and right. And there's new airlines coming in and they're bringing in new hub, points of origin. In the country of Belize, there is one Radisson hotel, one Best Western hotel, and those are both in Belize City. On Ambergris Key, the #1 island in the world, there is not a single brand or flagged hotel. There's no Holiday Inn, there's no Marriott, there's no Sheraton, there's no Doubletree, there's no Hilton, there's no Hyatt, there's no Ritz-Carlton, there's no Four Seasons, there's no Super 8, there's no Motel 6. Not a single branded or flagged hotel. Does that raise any red flags with anybody? It should.
Yeah, when are they coming?
It absolutely should. I mean, and you may not have known that to ask, but now that you know that, the single most important question that you need to have answered before you go home tonight is, why would the hotels not be there? If the airlines are, why are the airlines and the hotels in total opposition to one another? And I'll tell you exactly the reason. This is the most valuable information of the entire evening. So, I gotta take a sip of water. Sorry. In Belize, if you contact the Belize Tourism Board and you were to get the statistics of the hotel occupancy for the last 10 years for Ambergris Caye, you would be provided a report by the Belize Tourism Board, the official government ministry, that would show 49.8% annual occupancy. That's the 10-year average. Now, do you think that and let's just, for sake of numbers, do we all agree we can round that up to 50%? 49.8%, we'll call it 50%. Do you think 50% occupancy makes a vice president at Marriott or Hyatt or Hilton excited? No. No, in fact, when they see 50% occupancy, what that tells them is this is a juvenile market. It's an infantile market. It's a market that hasn't reached maturity and hasn't had growth sufficient for them to enter the market. Now, let me tell you where the problem is. Because, as you'll recall, I mentioned that for the last 2 years, there's not a single property that's been operating at less than 90% occupancy. But the government statistics show a 49.8% average. In fact, here's what's really telling. In 2011, we had a record year. We went up 16% on our tourism arrivals. But the official numbers by government count, we went from about a 49.7% to a 49.8% occupancy, even though our tourism arrivals went up by 16%. How can that be? I'll tell you exactly how. If you have pen and paper, I want you to do a little math. Write down the number 74. There's a condo project on the island called Grand Caraïbe. Grand Caraïbe has 74 condos. Now, at Grand Caraïbe, we have 10 owners that live in their condos full-time. So those 10 are obviously not rented out. We have 46 condos that are in the rental pool. So 46 owners choose to rent theirs out on a nightly or weekly basis. And that leaves how many left? We have 46 plus 10 is 56. 56 from 74 is 18. So we have 18 condos left, and those are what we call lock-and leaves. Lock-and leaves are people who own a condo. They don't want to rent it out. They don't want somebody else staying in their condo. They have their own furniture, their own family pictures, their own decorations, and when they're not there, they lock it up and they leave it and nobody goes in. So 46 units in the rental pool. Now, when you check into a hotel in Belize, and I'm going to just grab a napkin here as a... When you check into a hotel, you have a form that you fill out that has your name, your address, your passport number, your check-in date, your check-out date, and what your nightly rate is. And it's a carbon copy form. Belize is a manual system. They don't have a lot of computerization. So when you fill out your form, you get a copy, and the hotel keeps a copy. Now, in Belize, taxes are paid monthly, not annually. Belize operates like a small country, net 30 days. So it's just like a small company. When taxes are paid is on the 15th of the month for the preceding month. So on the 15th of August, I paid my July taxes. 15th of September, I pay my August taxes. If I stay in a hotel, I pay 12.5% hotel tax. So if it's a $100 room rate, I pay $112.50 when I check out. $100 goes to the hotel, and they pay the other $12.50 to the government on the 15th of the next month. Now, the way that the payment of taxes is tracked is I go to the government on the 15th of the month with my stack of forms. And I give the forms over to the government along with a register receipt that adds them all up and says, here's the taxes that go with it. And that's what's called declared occupancy. It's what I declare the occupancy to be. Now, the potential exists that one of those forms could fall off the top and doesn't get turned in. And if it doesn't get turned in, well, then it doesn't get added up. And where would those extra taxes go? Well, they'd probably just stay where they were, which I was the benefactor holding on to those taxes that were collected on behalf of the government. But that's not the real issue. That's a tiny possible little flaw in the system. Here's the real issue. We've got our 46 condos in the rental pool at Grand Caraïbe. If all of the units in the rental pool at Grand Caraïbe are occupied, how many forms do I have for that one night? 46. What's the occupancy if I have 46 condos rented at Grand Caraïbe and there's 46 in the rental pool? Who can tell me what occupancy that is? 100%, right? Or so you would think. Here's the problem. 46 forms get turned into the government. They look up on the hotel tax license and they see that Grand Caraïbe, let's see, Grand Caraïbe has 74 units. We have 46 forms. 46 divided by 74 is 62%. So we write down 62% occupancy. Now, my wife is what's called a CPM, a certified property manager. She's the only CPM in Central America. Her background is she managed 5,000 units in Colorado. We have a lot of property management experience, more than anybody in the country of Belize. When I uncovered this back in about 2008, I went to the director of the Belize Tourism Board. And I was so excited because I thought, I'm going to help the country by showing them the error of their system, of their accounting. And I sat down with the director of the Belize Tourism Board and I said, you guys are doing a complete and total disservice to the country. You keep reporting that we're doing it like a 49, 50% occupancy, but your math is all wrong. And I showed them exactly what I just showed you. And his answer was, well, nobody else is complaining about it. Nobody else has brought it up or seems to have issue with it. And I said, do you think the other hotel owners, the resort operators, are going to tell you that they have a problem with it? Because when companies like Marriott and Hilton and Hyatt and Sheraton research and they see that it's consistently a 45, 50% occupancy, what do? They just say, okay, well, we'll come back and look at it in a couple years' time. Meanwhile, the airlines are adding flights from Los Angeles and Chicago, doubling up their flights from Atlanta. New airlines are coming in. Overnight arrivals, 5 years in a row of all-time record growth, single-digit, double-digit growth, and yet it's all in the accounting being wrong. And so when I sat down with the director of the Belize Tourism Board and I showed him this, I appealed to him. I said, please, for the sake of the tourism industry, for the sake of the stakeholders, you've got to fix this. And he said candidly, he said, John, we are a department of 3 or 4 people. He said, how could we possibly change it? He said, you're asking us to call every hotel and every resort every month? Would you have us call every month and ask how many units entered the rental pool, how many left the rental pool? Because that changes on a monthly basis. The only way for us to manage it with our small department is to take the number of forms divided by the number of units at the property, and that's what we go off of. And everybody else seems to be fine with it. Nobody else has a problem. Well, get this. At Grand Caraïbe 2 years ago, there weren't 10 people living there, there were 6. It's gone from 6 to 10. I guarantee you that next year, instead of 46 units in the rental pool, it'll probably be 42. So if they're full, instead of it being 46 out of 74, it'll be 42 out of 74. The potential exists for our occupancy to actually start going down because of the way they calculate it. Now, I will tell you this. The hotels aren't stupid. They see that TripAdvisor has rated this one of the top 10 up-and-coming destinations in the world. They will only bang their head against the wall for so long. They will only take the BTB numbers at face value for so long until they come and say, something is going on and we got to do something about it. The key is, now's the time to take advantage of what they don't know. Because do you think that values and appreciation will go up or go down when you have the mass advertising and marketing appeal of the brands and the flags coming into the marketplace? You have an unfair advantage that will disappear once they have that knowledge. Any other questions? That was a great question, by the way, whoever asked that. Okay. Well, guys, I thank you so. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
One more. So, what about the Sheratons and the Hiltons and all them? Can they even function or operate profitably without being able to go 50 stories high?
Well, it means that they have to be a boutique property with very, very high rates. I mean, there are properties. I mean, if you go to Key West, for example, the Westin has a beautiful property in Key West that is all 2-story construction. In fact, Key West also has limitations on height. And what you find is that the branded properties in Key West that are limited to 2- and 3-story construction are $800,000, $1,200 a night properties. They have to be, because to not have the 10, 20, 30-story buildings, they operate at the boutique level, and it's a much, much higher room rate. So I think that I think we will see some of those properties starting to come into the marketplace, but if anything, they're going to drive values even higher and the exclusivity even higher. Well, thank you so very much. I'm passionate about Belize. I love it. I live it every day, and it's a pleasure for me to get to share it with others, and it's also a pleasure to get to invite you to participate through Dave in what is really an exceptional opportunity. I'm a big proponent in putting a person putting their money where their mouth is. In the interest of full disclosure, I'm the broker on the project, but more significantly, I'm an investor with my own lots that I've purchased myself. So when I stand before you like this, I see more deal flow. I see more opportunities go across my desk than any other person in the country of Belize. And this is where I personally choose to invest. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say it to impress you. I only say it to share with you that take advantage of the fact that I have that knowledge, and I'm investing alongside you and Dave and anyone else involved in the syndication. So thank you for your hospitality and inviting me here, and what a great meal.
Thank you, John, and thank you guys for coming out. I hope you enjoyed it. And for those of you, there may be a few, but for those of you who would like to be on the email list, just write your email on the forms. Every month there's a video, it's like a progress video that gets filmed at Mahogany Bay Village, and it shows the progress of what happened in that 30-day span. So if you'd like to get the emails, just jot your email down on the form, and I'll make sure you get on that list. So thanks for coming out.